right club. Be the right club today. Yes!
Again, have to be careful of the speed.
What a comeback season for Hal Sutton.
Come right back toward the hole. How about in? That's the second eagle he's made it for this week.
17 years later, Hal Sutton is the Players' champion.
He's got it going right at the flagstick. It'll be up. It is.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Be the Right Club Today podcast. Hal, what is up?
Well, not so much with me, but there's a lot up with you. You played in an event this week.
Played in an individual number 2, third tournament of the year. Had it going for a little bit. I kind of felt the juices a little bit. I played a Memorial down here where they're going to have the Houston Open in a couple of months, and shot 70 the first day, and then was 5 under through 11. Second day, all my buddies are giving me grief saying I got nervous breath. At the time I was one shot out of the lead. I didn't realize I was. I didn't look at the leaderboard one time. Had it 5 under through 12, bogeyed 13, birdied 14 to stay at 5 under, and then made a mess of 15 and 16. Went bogey double and shot 70 again. But it was a lot of fun. It really was. I was nervy to start the round. First time to, I was playing with some good players in our section and just kind of getting back out there. One of the guys had PJ Tour status for a couple years. Carlos could really play. But it was fun. We've been talking off air about, some of the things I went through, and I, in the end, my history, I've always been a little wild off the tee. I've always hit it a long way, but I've been wild, and I hit a couple wayward drives at the wrong time, and I made a mess of the holes, and it kind of messed with me. And so I've been kind of weighing whether it was physical or how committed I was. Something we talk about all the time on here, and in the end, I don't think I was 100% there mentally. I think I did an okay job, but I wasn't as sharp as I could have been, and so that's this balancing act that we have to figure out. How much of it was my physical golf swing letting me down, and how much was my my mental game being off.
So let me inject something here. You said you weren't quite your mental game wasn't quite sharp.
Yep.
How many tournaments have you played in the last 3 years?
Not very many. 3, and they've all been this year.
Okay,
Yeah.
So that's the reason why I bring that up for all the listeners out there. One of the ways we get tournament tough is that we play in a lot of tournaments, and we get tournament tough because we're tested a lot.
Yep.
You haven't been tested a lot lately, and I haven't told you really what I thought, but I sent you a text last night and told you I thought you played well. I know it wasn't what you wanted, but for not having played any more than you played, that's pretty solid.
Yeah.
And I mean, to me, if I were you, I'd be optimistic about playing more.
Oh, for sure. And I don't like a couple people, like some of my buddies were giving me like choking emojis and stuff, and I and gifts and all that stuff. And I really, honest to God, I was not nervous at all. I didn't even know where I stood. The golf course, they didn't have it set up super hard, and Ben Kern and some of those guys that played well the first day, I figured they were going to shoot 3 or 4 under again, and I wasn't even close to the lead. But it was just nice to, I was 5 under through 11, had birdied 3 in a row, and I didn't even birdie in the par 5s. Like I, usually take advantage of the par 5s, and it was just a great feeling to see a couple putts fall and just kind of get it going a little bit. And frankly, I was going to try and birdie the rest of them, and I had good precise plans, and there was a little bit of fogginess from. And this is some of the stuff we're going to talk about today, from getting over the shot, having the in the office, I had the thought process where I had the plan picked out, and then going from the office to over the golf ball, there was some fogginess, and I've just got to get better at it. I've got to figure it out.
Well, we'll get into that, but one of the things you said, some of your buddies sent the emojis of choking and all that sort of stuff. That's like fake media, basically.
Oh, sure.
The world is trying to get you to get your cloudiness on what's really happening and think about what they're telling you is happening.
Right.
That happened to me a lot in my career. You know, the media would write something about me, and people that don't even really know, they're not really even qualified to have an opinion.
Right.
And, you know, all of a sudden, in a weak moment, I'm listening to what they have to say.
Yeah.
So, you know, one of the things that I want to point out here is you need to get caught up as your greatest critic yourself, not the world, basically, because half the world is not knowledgeable and the other half don't want to see you do well. So,
man, that's exactly right. And it goes back to the point of just how hard golf is already. And it was funny, you know, Carlos Sins played on tour, you know, and he's out at Houston Oaks where you came from or were for a while. And he kind of made a mess of the first couple holes. And he said after the fourth hole, he's like, man, did we already play 9 holes already? And it was, I got home and I was so worn out. Like tournament golf is just, it's just different. And I was so tired. And again, the course isn't that tough and it wasn't that difficult, but like just it's hot and feeling the heat and being in contention a little bit. It was like, man, I definitely enjoyed it, and like you said, this gives me kind of a reason. Like this was the first time in forever, like I couldn't sleep going to bed thinking about my golf game. Like most of the time, I'm not going to sleep thinking about my students' golf games. But it was like I was kind of feeling, okay, what can I do to kind of get through some of these issues and be a little bit more committed and just trusting myself and you know, keeping that kind of clear picture in my head. You know, one of the things I struggle with is, you know, driver's always just been a little bit crooked. And my misses, if you ask my college coach, he would laugh right now because I gave him nightmares with some of the foul balls I hit off the tee when I was younger. And I'm better at it now. I don't hit it near as crooked, but I still have kind of that scar tissue that in my head. And I just had a fear of this big right ball miss all for the last 3 days, practice round, and the fairways were pretty open and didn't really have any issues, but I was just fearing it. And the 2 balls I missed were left. I almost overcommitted. I almost said, I'm going to release this and let it go instead of just saying, no, I'm going to try and hit it a little cut off that tee or off that tree or trying to stay more of like, what am I trying to do versus I was in essence trying to release it so hard to not hit it somewhere where I didn't want to go.
So you committed to something, just not the thing you wanted to commit to. You made sure you didn't do what you were fearing.
That's right. And that's why I said I felt like my commitment was okay. I was probably a B or a B minus to B plus range, somewhere in there. It wasn't like complete decommitted, you know, non-committal at all, but I still wasn't quite as sharp as I have been in some practice rounds or as I was even 2 weeks ago at the harder golf course in Deerwood. But, you know, you don't, just like you and I talked about a couple weeks ago when I said I was kind of interested in going to play, and you said you have to go test and see what you got. And I realized really quickly, like, I can still play, and if I can go work on it a little bit, I can definitely compete in this section, and, you know, maybe, you know, have a chance to sneak into a PGA Championship at some point. It'd be really fun to just go try and qualify through the section and do all that stuff. But great learning experience. You know, I didn't, like I said, I was nervous early on, but I wasn't nervy late in the round. It wasn't a nerve like, oh my gosh, I'm 5 under. I've been under par before. It wasn't that at all. I was 5 under going into a tough little par 3 and hit a pretty good shot and just kind of cut it a little bit, but it wasn't like I steered it or anything like that. I overcommitted away from a miss that I was imagining in my head. And that's one of the things we'll get into, kind of process versus result in a little bit. I want to kind of pick your brain on how you did it. And sometimes it's hard to ask you these questions because you always hit it so dang straight and hit it so good.
Well, not always. Not always. You know, I hit a lot of straight shots, but I still had my moments where I didn't hit it down my target line.
Yeah, sure.
And, you know, I mentioned to you before we got on air here, you know, when I was on tour, you know, the guys that really playing good, you know, you look up and that ball started right where you had imagined.
Yeah.
And it may vary a little bit off of that line, but at least it started on that line.
Yeah.
You know, everybody out there listening, you know, when you're hitting your line with your putt, you know that you're making some putts. Mm-hmm. But when that ball's not even starting on your line, you're not making anything. Mm-hmm. And I listened to that, you know, and said it myself. You know, I just couldn't hit my start line. Yeah. And if we're not hitting our start line in a full swing, then we're adjusting that club face. Yeah. And it's having to happen fast.
Yeah, sure. Especially with drivers. And
that's usually when I'm fearing right, so I'm going to make sure I don't go right and I go left.
Right. how many times talking about driver a little bit, because I've always been the type of player that I felt like I needed to swing almost 100% with driver. I would tend to blow it right if I didn't commit to it. I've always said if I decommit it's right, if I overcommit it's left. Very rarely would I with driver go full commitment, full, let's say, release, and it would go right. With you, you've always said you had to be kind of talked into or convinced to go forced to go hard. What percentage do you think on average you swung your driver at? Like 95%, 90%? I mean, do you think you ever went 100% on driver?
No, I don't think I did much, to be honest.
Where did you learn that?
Well, I went 100% when I was in college. When I was an amateur, I think I went 100%. When I got out on tour, I was working with Floyd Horgan and I was working with Jimmy Ballard both. I'd go to one time, one the next time. Yeah. And, Jimmy was really, big on centrifugal force and keeping the forces, maintaining the forces. And every time I felt like I went really hard, I didn't feel like I could keep the forces. Felt like the club got behind me too much. And I either had to slow down to get it caught up, and the timing of that was never effective for me. Yeah. To me, good players, the feel that we talk about having is right where impact is at. If you're on target at impact, meaning the club is here, halfway down.
Yeah, too far back or behind you or in front of you.
Well, no, what I'm saying is if it's parallel to the ground on the downswing, if you're on target for perfect impact for you. And if you got to do something else, you're going to do it. Yeah. The mind is sharp enough that we can do a split second something, but it's usually not exactly right when we do that.
And it's usually subconscious because we're out of position.
Right.
Whether we know it or not, it's making an adjustment to hit it. The thing that fascinates me about, I grew up in more of a speed. I mean, there were a lot of guys in your era that were trying to hit it hard, but obviously I grew up with more modern equipment and kids lashing at it. I always struggle with going at it smooth. And, we talk about taking inventory of your game all the time. And I think that I've got to develop, I know how to do it now, but I've got to be able to implement a controlled driver swing in competition, right? I could do it. You and I go playing a little fun game. I can chip driver, but I've got to be able to develop it. And it's interesting because you kind of learned how to cruise, and I can cruise with an iron no problem, but you put the driver in my hand and it's like, because I've decommitted so many times that I've got to just go ahead and send it, and it's just interesting, right? Like it's just something that I'm gonna have to slowly work on, and like you even said before we started, like I need to go out and go learn how to even go like really slow, like hit a 200-yard driver that's fully committed, that there's no anticipation, there's no bailout, because we teach it with short game, we teach it with putting, don't anticipate the ball, and I'm anticipating the ball a little bit too much.
So you remember when you and I first got together out at Big Easy, I would give a lesson and I'd tell somebody, I'd see how slow you can go with a full golf swing with a driver.
Yep. And see how straight you can hit it.
And see how straight you can hit it.
Yeah.
And the reason why I always used to do that, I mean, I think you asked me at one point, and I said, I don't know, you just can feel everything when you do that.
Yeah.
And, when you go full out, you can't feel anything.
No. Well, and especially if you're not like in really good shape. Like I haven't played much golf, and I'm not in great golf shape. And I'm 6'7" and all knees and elbows anyway, and I feel hips and legs going all over the place. It's amazing. I can even hit it sometimes. But what's funny about that is I always did the same thing with little wedges or irons, but I never implemented it with driver. It was just always like driver was just always full send. And I think obviously I know it limited me when I was younger because I didn't have as much control, but I think it's something that going forward I'm going to develop and just add another tool to the toolbox and be able to hit a bunting little driver. I can hit like a low hard fade, but it's still swinging at it really hard. I've got to be able to just sit there and go 80% because my 80% is still going to go 295, 300. It's going to be long enough. I'm just saying.
Don't hear that.
That was a little soft
He's
flex.
bragging right there.
A little soft flex. But again, I mean, I can hit it a long way, but it can go crooked. So I'm not a 14 fairway around guy like you are.
I wasn't 14 fairways. To me, the magic number, if I hit 11 fairways out of 14, I was usually happy because the other 2 or 3 that I missed weren't very far offline. They were still, and I'll tell you something about not being very far offline. You usually paid a supreme price in the rough for not being very far offline, because in those days, that was the rough that got the water.
Yeah.
And the further right or further left you hit was thinner rough.
Right. Well, if I hit 11 fairways around, I was celebrating with a cake or something. So just yeah. And
well, anyway, golf is a tough game, and I was just sitting here thinking as you were describing all that. Between you and I, there's probably not many people, if we're both sitting in a room on a lesson, the knowledge between the two of us for the lesson, both playing and both, 3D and everything else in golf, there's probably not 2 people that can sit in a room and have more knowledge for a student. And we know how to do it. But to go out now and do it like you were just trying to do this weekend, even makes the best of people, the most knowledgeable of people, still question whether we're doing it right.
Oh yeah. And I was nervous. First hole I had an 10 footer up the hill, and my hands were a little shaky. And I'm putting arm lock putter, so they can't shake, right? That's supposed to take it away. I pulled my putt probably 2 inches or 3 inches, and I was like, man, it's just golf. Like one of the things that Brett McCabe said is, it's like, we're not going to die out there. What's the worst that can happen? I shoot 78 or 80 or whatever, and I play bad. And I kept reminding myself of like, look, I'm blessed enough now to be able to play where this my score is not my self-worth like it was when I was mini touring it and stuff.
Well, let's qualify this just so that's a golf death. You can have a golf death out there.
You can.
And as a golfer,
it feels that way.
It feels that way.
No,
and that's why this is so hard. Yeah. We weren't worrying about physically dying. We were worrying about having, no reputation after this is over. Or what will our reputation be after this? And
I think, too, like, I'm worried about, we've talked about this a bunch, and even through some of the mental stuff we've talked about today, is I'm trying to avoid long-lasting scars. It's the scars of the bad shots at the bad times and this is a perfect segue into our next little topic, but Cam Smith versus Finau in the playoff, right? Yeah. And Cam's been playing great. And for those of you that didn't see, they both, Cam and Finau both finished really well in the 4th round to best John Rahm.
Right.
And then they get in the playoff on 18, and Cam hits it. Finau hits a good drive down the middle, and Cam blows it right out of bounds and makes double, and Finau wins. And I asked you, I said, in a perfect world, if you're in his camp, you've got to tell him, look, you've been playing great. It's one bad swing. But if Cam doesn't seem like the type of player that's going to let it bother him, but if it does, there's some scar tissue. Scar tissue, just a little bit of a scar just got notched on his brain that he's going to have to avoid at times when he gets under the gun again.
That, and as I fired back at you and I said, Finau has struggled to get a victory in.
Yeah.
And, of course, Finau shot 5 under on the back 9, so he played really well, and he hit the drive down the middle. And then Cam hits it out of bounds and gives it to him, basically. So, Tony is going to – I hope Tony, if I were in Tony's camp, I'd say, you played fantastic, you deserve to win, all this sort of stuff. But in the back of his mind, he's wondering if Cam had hit it right down the middle of the fairway, what would have happened?
Yeah, right.
Tony wanted to win by his own accord, not by somebody else's accord.
Yeah.
And, and like you said, Cam, we go into decade golf, Scott talks all the time about how there's 60 yards of fairway out there, and, regardless, that's what you do, or 60 yards of,
from trouble to trouble.
From trouble to trouble.
Yeah, right.
And, I don't always agree with that, because there are times that the shot that's at hand you may not feel good about for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And you, being the CEO of your game, have to validate that, not, and I'm going to say this one more time, not before every tournament, not before every round, not before each 9 holes, but before every shot. That's called total commitment.
Yeah.
You got to make a decision. And sometimes that may be, I don't feel good with the driver here, I'm going to hit 3-wood. And to avoid, I'm feeling block.
to avoid a flinch or decommitment or whatever it is.
And
that's where I completely agree with you too, me being on the new school side. I completely agree with you. If you can't commit to driver on that particular hole, even if the math says to do so, like I think you've got to be able to sleep at night and know that you locked in and committed to it.
So we all are sitting here thinking about this, hoping, and you started this little talk here about Cam thinking that could be scar tissue. That's because everybody has suffered with that. The only reason why you know that could be scar tissue is because you have scar tissue from that. Mm-hmm. Just like everybody out there has scar tissue from that. Don't think Cameron hadn't thought about that.
Sure.
And now his goal is to prove that I have no scar tissue from that.
Yeah, because now he gets into another playoff, and let's say he makes bogey and loses, and now the media, just like you dealt with about the Masters or whatever, starts chatting. Oh, can Cam not get it done? They've got to write a story, and then that becomes a story. He reads it, and now in the back of his mind, okay, I got to get it done, or I don't want to be known as a choker, whatever it is.
Right.
When he just hit a bad tee shot on a really tough hole at just the worst time.
Well, one of the greatest players of all time, Tom Watson. They tried to label him choking in the beginning of his career, and he's far from a choker.
Oh, yeah.
And, I just, he was just mentally tough enough to fight back on what they said, And
I've always struggled with choking from the fact of, like, just how hard golf is. One bad swing is not a choke, in my opinion. He just made a bad swing. If you do it over the course of 9 or 12 holes, or you make a 10 on a hole because you made a mess, kind of like Van de Velde, okay, fine, you can maybe label Van de Velde decision. They were just a bunch of bad decisions. But I've always struggled with, he choked.
Well, for a little while there, I was kind of active on Twitter. And when Tiger made the 10 on number 12, and then he birdied 5 out of the last 6 holes coming in, I tweeted that Tiger just made his greatest contribution to golf if everybody was looking. He made a 10 and then made 5 out of 6 holes he birdied coming in. He did not quit.
Yeah.
What a lesson for everybody to learn. And not only that, it didn't affect him mentally. Mm-hmm. And, if somebody else made a 10, if any of y'all out there listening made a 10, I can guarantee your thinking would have been different than Tiger's.
Sure, and it kind of makes me think, like, instead of calling it choking, it's like mentally quitting. If you mentally quit, okay, fine, that's different. But like if you're committed and you're hitting bad shots, sometimes golf just kicks your butt, and that's what happens.
Well, mentally quitting is a better way to define that.
Yeah, I think that might be the best way, because if you just completely get out of your process and can't bring it back in like you had to do at the PGA Championship, bring it back in and say, no, I'm going to commit and get through this and go execute. Because again, if you can execute and you can lock in and stay there mentally, stay present mentally, then you can sleep at night. You can live with yourself, because sometimes you're going to make bad golf swings. But if you can feel yourself flinching, not completely trying, locking into what you're trying to do, then that to me is air quotes choking.
Everybody hits bad shots. I've seen the best players in the game hit shots you wouldn't even believe they hit. So, just being prepared to hit them and then recover from them.
So, let's go into kind of this conversation of physical versus mental, process versus result. And I really have one specific question for you that I'd like to dive in a little deeper on, and it kind of goes into what we talked about with my tournament. Like, I had a little bit of a fear of right, and I was anticipating impact a little bit too much. And how as if you were my caddy and I hit a tee shot or two bad or whatever, like what's the message from the caddy to the player, and then how did you go about, and I guess really what I'm talking about is from start of backswing to impact to past impact. How did you, at full speeds, I feel like it's easier going slower at times. Like, it's easier to stay locked in over a putt. It's easier sometimes to stick because it's just a shorter motion. At least I haven't struggled with it as much. I got through the chipping yips a little bit, but how did you stay locked in? How did you stay, because there's so many times the brain can flinch, and how did you stay locked in mentally? We understand there's going to be ebbs and flows physically. You're just going to get out of position sometimes, but how did you stay locked in from the beginning of the takeaway through impact to the finish?
That's a great question. I've thought about this a lot. I mentioned to you, great players are always aware of where impact is and what they need to do through impact. Trevino made a statement. I was playing a practice round with him at Memorial. This was early on in my career, Muirfield. And Trevino said, Hal, he said, if you can control the club face for this far at the bottom of the club,
basically a foot before and a foot after.
Yes, exactly. If you can control it for 24 inches right there, you'll have a really good career. Now, that wasn't the definition that I was looking for. That was a brief, real broad statement as far as I'm concerned. So, to me, I have a deeper thought than that. The club face doesn't move much from here to here. Mm-hmm. But if it's having to move a lot from here to here, you got some wide misses coming your way.
Sure, a lot of open and closing of the face.
A lot of opening and closing of the face.
So, again, I'm asking somebody that's been one of the straightest and best ball strikers to ever play this game and to ever live, and you still hit it. When you do hit it now, you still hit it really good. Obviously, we have people all the time that they have no physical control over the golf club enough to where they can, their physical roller coaster is going to completely outweigh their mental. Even if their mental game is sharp, they're still so limited there. Walk me through. Let's even go to the Players Championship. Let's go to the 18th hole. You knew exactly what you had to do. You had to keep it a little bit. You couldn't hit it left of that flag, or you shouldn't hit it left of that flag.
The tee shot was a lot harder than the second shot.
Okay, so then let's talk tee shot. Okay, so you've been driving it well. You had some little swing thought. You had a target in mind. When you stepped from the office being behind the ball where you were thinking about what you were trying to do. You had a picture. You had whatever you had going on. How do you then get through impact being completely locked into whatever it was you were trying to do?
My mind was quiet.
Okay, but
I didn't have a thought. So that sounds contradictory. I had thoughts back there of what I wanted to do. Then I quieted my mind when I got over the ball and let it happen. I didn't have the last minute thought of I don't want to hit this right, or I want to,
there you wouldn't want to hit it left.
Yeah, there I wouldn't want to hit it left.
Yeah.
So to me, I've referenced this book. Dr. Kemp, a professor at TCU, wrote a book after he interviewed all the great players, and he condensed it down to one phrase: the greatest players played with the quietest minds. So you think the greatest players are thinking all the time, but they're not thinking all the time.
Yeah.
They have already thought. They have already practiced. Then they don't get in the way with their mind. They let what they practiced on actually take place.
Okay, so where I struggle with that a little bit, at least me personally, and then some of the sports psychologists I've talked to, is if our brain does. We keep talking about this, and I think Brett McCabe says our brain doesn't like uncertainty, right? So if we just sat here and tried to be, and your generation is way better than my generation at it, because we've been inoculated with the phone, and it's hard for us to stay on any topic for anything for more than 7 or 8 seconds. But how do we? It's almost, you didn't go blank, but it's almost like you did. It's almost like your brain wasn't. You didn't have a conscious thought at all. You could say subconsciously you had the shot shape in your head, you had some intention in your mind, but you weren't really locked in on anything, whether it was a feel or this or that, right? The fear for me, and with a lot of the players that we work with, is, and we've talked to them about this, is if you're not locked into something, your brain can fire off in any second or any time. So do you think that you were just so mentally focused at that time that you corralled your brain into going anywhere else?
That's what I am trying to say, really.
Okay.
I had a target.
Okay.
I never lost sight of the target. But that's all I had in my mind was the target.
Okay.
I didn't have how I had to do it to get it to the target.
Okay, so then you were quiet. You had a quiet mind on a landing spot or on a tree or on something out there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you weren't you didn't just go blank.
Well, in my mind, I went blank, but I had a target.
Okay.
I knew I was aimed. I trusted.
Yeah.
I always had a spot.
Yeah.
I set up to the spot.
Yeah.
I knew I was on the target. All I've got to do is make sure my body and my arms are moving at the speed that they normally do.
But no real conscious thought there.
No
either.
real conscious thought.
Yeah.
I feel where impact is. I was feeling it really well. I drove it really great.
Yeah.
The only fairway I missed was on number 16, and I just loafed a little bit, and it went just barely into the right rough, which is what it should do if I loafed a little bit and didn't quite get it released.
So when you were a little off, so say the week after, I don't know if I've ever asked you this question. The week after, the hardest tournament in the world to play well in is the one right after you win a golf tournament, right? At least it's harder. It might not be the hardest. You know, I don't even know how you finished.
Oh, I don't even know if I played the next week.
Okay, or the next tournament.
You
could possibly you could remember playing in. You know, your intention's the same, right?
Yeah.
What goes wrong?
Well, nothing may go wrong. I mean, not necessarily.
It's just the physical and the mental aren't as aligned, aren't as sharp.
You've relaxed a little bit. You know, you've accomplished something. You've celebrated it a little bit. You know, Tiger was one of the best at that I ever saw. I mean, most of the guys, you know, we won something big. It's a little bit harder to go to the next event with the same intention and intensity that you had the prior tournament.
You had the goal of winning the tournament. You won. Now you're relaxing a little bit.
Right.
But let's go back, because I'm so fascinated about this part. What kept you from playing at the Players Championship level more often? When you look back, and again, this is such a hard question, but you being such a good ball striker, and I've always said I thought you seem to be more, you know, just people listening at home, listening to you talk on here, you're very committed to, you know, when you just like Phil Blackmar said, you get that scowl on your face, like you're tough as nails, hard to beat, like fully committed.
Well, I'll tell you, anger used to make me play really well.
Yeah.
I'd get agitated because of something, or you know, and it caused me to raise my intensity level. And you know, the return, whenever I started playing well in '98, I was angry because people had already pretty much given me to washed up, basically. And I thought, I'm anything but washed up.
Right.
And, you know, the anger of that caused me to knuckle down and play harder. I still didn't play great every week.
Sure.
I mean, you know, every time the most amazing stat that I've ever seen is how few cuts Tiger Woods has ever missed.
Sure.
I mean, how do you keep your intensity level to that point? How do you win that many tournaments against the best players in the world?
Right.
I mean, he just got a different level of, you know, we're physical versus mental.
Sure.
I mean, he's on the high end of both of those things.
Yeah, which leads me to ask you, like, when you, in 98, 99, 2000, when you were on top, or even very early in your career, when you did, like, for me, I would say, I'm obviously being 6'7", I was going to hit some shots offline, but my biggest issue was I didn't believe in my physical enough. My mental game was too roller coastery to match a roller coastery physical game. Like, but your physical game was super, super consistent. Let's say, use the word consistent. So, if you look back to when you didn't hit it as well or didn't play as well in and out of 2000, 98, 99, 2000, even though you were, you know, second or third on the money list those years or whatever. What do you think it was? What do you think, was it more on the mental side? Was it more golf swing at times just getting a little bit off? Was it, I mean, because I want to get into, like, when you felt like you weren't committed, because I know you had times where you felt like that.
Well, yeah. If specifically we're talking 98 to 2001, let's just say that. Yeah. I would say physically I was a lot better off than I was mentally. And the inconsistency would be because of mental drift.
Okay.
And, you know, for a lot of different reasons. You know, traveling is tough. Traveling with a family is even tougher.
Yeah.
You know, answering to everybody else's needs and wishes is tough. It's distracting.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't have a team of people that took care of all that for me.
Right.
You know, and now everybody out there's got a team of people.
Sure.
So that the one person that's making all the money can focus on what he's doing.
Yeah.
You know, we had to be multi-purposers out there. And
what about like in the round when you felt like, you know, you're hitting it pretty good, but just you didn't score as well as you could have or hit it as good as you had been because you weren't there? I mean, did you have any weakness as far as pre-shot routine, as far as over the ball? Like, how, because we really haven't gotten into that a whole lot. Like mine was always at times I either wouldn't have a precise plan or I would flinch a little bit at impact. Did you?
I never had a lot of the flinching at impact. Basically, if I started the round mentally tough, I finished the round mentally tough.
Yeah.
And
so if you didn't play real well, it would have been more of my physical motion just wasn't. I wasn't as precise with my movement patterns as I mentally. You would look up and be surprised if it didn't go where you thought it was supposed to go.
Yeah. Well, what I'm saying is, if mentally I wasn't very sharp because of other things, whenever I got there, I carried that out on the golf course with me, which might have affected the physical part of it too.
So if you were caddy Hal Sutton or coach Hal Sutton to player Hal Sutton in 99, 2000, would you have said you needed to be more precise in your game plan, like office stuff? Like you needed to think, like make sure you've eliminated all the outside world and said, okay, what the hell am I trying to do on this shot?
Yeah, but that's not done back here behind this one particular shot. That's done before you ever start the round.
Okay.
You just don't float out of there on one particular shot on something. You either can't get your mind off of whatever you were thinking about, or you do get your mind off of it. I was never I was an intense player.
Yeah.
I didn't float in and float out.
Yeah.
It always amazed me watching Trevino and Fuzzy Zeller. They floated in, floated out. And I never knew how anybody could do that.
So not too many times would you have like a back left pin with an 8-iron in your hand and like bail out right, like don't go right. You didn't have too many of those times where it was like,
no, I'd get too aggressive in those places.
Okay.
I'd short side myself, or if I wasn't on the money, I would short side myself.
And so would you find yourself, your blame then would be placed more on just you overcooked it, bad golf, like almost not bad golf swing, but a physical issue and not necessarily.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So you said something to me. So I made the comment that I like to hit fades off the tee. So I've never been great at drawing driver, and I've kind of built a driver that now is all fade all the time, and I control it a lot better. And I told you that I was fearing at this tournament the last couple of days. I was fearing a right ball, and I was having a hard time. being 100% locked in. And I'd pick a target. I'm going to try and fade it off of here, and then it was almost like I'd set up to the fade, and then I'd say release it. And I told you, I said, I think if I could go back, I would have been better off if I would have just committed to fade. Like over the ball, I'm thinking fade, and just be an athlete and go moot, because I've hit enough of them. Like with an iron, if I'm trying to hit a cut with an iron, I'll preset a little bit, and then it's fade. Like I just have I consider it a process thought, but you almost hinted that might be a result thought. Where does your mind go when I say that? I mean, do you think that having a thought process over the ball to curve it one way or the other depending on what the shot requires, is that too result oriented, or would you consider that still a process oriented feel or thought?
So I used to get this sort of question a lot when I do clinics or whatever. How do you hit a fade? Do you know how I hit a fade? I see the fade.
Yeah.
I don't run through a checklist of all the things I got to do to hit a fade.
Yeah.
I've just hit enough fades in my life that I allow my brain to say, okay, let's see that fade. And that triggers everything in my body that I need to do in order to hit the fade. But the minute I start questioning the process of how to do it, okay, what do I need to do that? It complicates things. So whenever I've told you that, my brain is quiet and I'm allowing it to happen, meaning I looked at it, I saw what I wanted to do in my head. The imagery in my head is clear. I see exactly what I want to do. Then just let it happen, because I've hit that shot. People used to ask me, when I beat Jack Nicklaus at the PGA,
right,
they'd say, were you nervous? I said, no, I wasn't nervous, because I had beat him 1,000 times.
Right.
Now, he wasn't standing there watching me,
yeah,
but the process was already very clear in my head,
yeah,
of what I had to do. And I think sometimes we get in our own way.
Well,
thinking too much.
Yeah. Especially at your level, that you had so much control over how you hit it and what you did.
See, we were talking out there beforehand, and I said I really want to go out and play, and I want to do it by start lines and feel. See, because I look at TrackMan numbers all the time and I look at video all the time, it's making me think of all the things that I never played with.
Right.
And I'm curious as to how I'm going to do after having done this for a while now. It's like, can I go out there and let my mind go quiet?
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that. I haven't looked at my swing on video or TrackMan or force play data, 3D data, but like 3 times this year. I haven't looked at it in probably 3 months. Now I'll hit a shot and see the TrackMan data when I'm demonstrating something, but like I haven't looked at it at all.
So I've got a question for you in front of everybody.
Here we go. I'm nervous.
So you see it when you hit a shot, you see what the numbers are. If one of those numbers was way off of what you intended to do, what would that do to you?
Okay, so this is a great question. So let's just say club path. So path, a zero path is if you're at home plate in baseball, zero path is second base, negative path is third base, positive path is first base. If it was everything was set up perfectly and I hit a stock shot, what I felt like was a stock shot, and my path was, let's say, more to the right than I would be. I would definitely take notice, because from a factual standpoint, I know if I'm going to hit fades, there's got to be, those numbers have to be in a range. Now, if it's 2 or 3 degrees, I don't care.
So I'm going somewhere with this.
Yeah.
The reason why you haven't taken notice, seen your swing more, or TrackMan numbers, is because when you have hit that shot, those numbers have reflected what you thought they should be. So your mind is quiet with that. Your mind gets active when it's not that.
Okay. So are you saying we can use the data to help quiet our minds?
You could, yeah. Sure you could.
I'm just messing with you.
Yeah, I know you're messing with me, but yes, you can.
But I think too, like this is a cool subject, a cool topic, because I think if you don't have a plan with the data as a player, if you're looking at it, then yeah, you can get lost in the 27 numbers that TrackMan gives you and be all over the place. But I think if Hal Sutton gets on TrackMan and gets a baseline for how it feels in here and then goes out and swing, if you want to hit a little draw, then the numbers, there's some factual numbers you got to get to. If you want to hit a little fade, there's some factual numbers you've got to get to.
Right.
And that would be the only thing I would say. Like, I don't care about club head speed, or I don't care about, a little bit of carry distance, obviously, but if I'm going to hit my little cut with a 6-iron, I got to have a path that's a little bit left.
So, we really couldn't quantify distance, and people weren't really chasing distance in my early days like they chase distance now. And, we chased an accurate shot because we had a wooden club with bulge and roll and heavy. They were heavy. And
a spinny ball.
And a spinny ball. So we were really trying to do everything we could to hit it. The faster I went, the less effective I was.
Yeah.
And so, it's tougher in many ways now, even though the equipment is set to allow that, to hit it straight. Most guys are, I see very few come in here that are worried about how straight they hit it. Most of them, I'm talking better players, most of them are wanting it to come down further from them.
Yeah.
They're wanting more distance.
Mm-hmm.
And
but I would say too, how many times do people come in here? What I was going to say when you were saying that is, like, I don't think drivers, I don't think it's easier to hit fairways now with the new equipment than it was necessarily back then. You guys chase control is basically what you chase, solid contact and control. But I think, how many players have come in here and said, I hit my driver super straight and I can't hit my irons at all?
None, almost.
Yeah.
But here's the reason why I think people can't hit it straight now is because they're swinging at it as hard as they can swing at it. That's we could argue this point from now on. They have equipment that allow them to do that, so they do it.
Yeah.
So they're not straight, but are they not straight because why are they not straight?
Yeah. And from whether it's club face awareness or inconsistent motion, or it's full out effort all the time and they can't really feel it. And I think it goes back to the biggest point, and you've been teaching it for years, like you said, but like every student that comes in here for a lesson, we almost everyone, if they're trying to make a change, we slow them down.
Yeah.
Every one of them, we slow them down.
And I can't tell y'all how many times I give a lesson and it'll be for an hour and they won't hit 20 balls.
Yeah.
I'll make them take swing after swing after swing without a ball down there, doing something at an extreme, trying to show them that they can get the club where they want to, as long as they don't have to see where the ball goes. The minute they have to put the ball down and they're going to see where it goes, it limits them on doing anything extreme.
I gave a lesson this morning on putting, and there were two guys there that were watching. They both had fought yips a little bit, and I said on 3 or 4 footers, they said, how do you get through them? And I said, honestly, I was like, we've got 2 or 3 really good players that have either closed their eyes on 3-footers, they've watched their hands on 3-footers, they've looked at the hole on 3-footers. Why? So they could get through it without worrying about contact and flinching and anticipating, and they could survive. And you even at one point chipped with your eyes closed on the Champions Tour, which is to me takes the most commitment of anything I've ever heard. Like that's crazy, but it was a way for you to commit because you knew there would be a little bit of a flinch.
I'm going to say this. You just opened the door for me to say this. Most of my career, I hit through the ball rather than at the ball.
Yeah.
The minute that I start thinking about at the ball is the minute I struggle. But if I think through anything, I had the first guy that ever gave me a lesson was a guy named Ed Peck, God rest his soul. He was a great guy. And he used to tell me, pretend that it's a sheet of paper and all you're wanting to do is bust the paper. Yeah. And, that may be why I swung at it easy most of my life. It was because all I was trying to do was hit through it and bust the paper. People that are swinging it hard, it's like an explosion. And I never felt like it was an explosion. I felt like when I played my best, I laid the ball out there.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like I hit the ball out there. And I felt like the ball, and I guarantee you there's been other people that have said this, some of the best players in the world felt like the ball stayed on the face a long time. And literally we know the ball cannot stay on the face a long time.
Yeah, and I think some of that too is you guys played with such squishy golf balls that it felt like, you had an 80 or 90 wound whatever compression golf ball, and it felt that way because now the golf balls feel so hard that it's like they spring off the face. But I agree. I mean, I still feel like you compress the ball into the ground, which doesn't ever happen, but that's what the feel was, right? That ball's long gone by then. It's interesting. This stuff's so interesting to me. Like I told a friend earlier, 2 or 3 years ago, I would have been 95% physical motion and 5% mental, and I dropped the ball on that, and there's when we've got kids or people playing in tournaments, like we've just got to make sure that they're good from start to finish.
So I'll ask you a question now. You've been asking me questions. Let me ask you a question. So we've got 72 holes. The other tournament that you played was a partnership tournament. So we've got 72 holes of individual tournament golf now. So improving your golf swing. This is really important, so y'all listen up to the answer here. We got to improve your golf swing, or we got to improve your mind?
Mind. Yeah.
Say that a little louder.
Mind.
So here's the reason why I bring this up. When you get to a certain level in the game, can you improve your golf swing? Yeah, you can. But it's going to be minuscule compared to the way you think. But understanding your own mind, you have to do that yourself. One of the things that I talk to a lot of people about is being responsible yourself to your own game. Instead of trying to hire out of it.
Yeah.
I mean, he and I are the hired hands. People try to hire out of this. Tell me how I can get better. Well, we might be able to tell you how you can get better, but soul searching with understanding is the way you're going to get better. Because you got to ask yourself, you're doing this right now. You're asking yourself the questions. What did I feel, even in the middle of the swing? See, that's deep soul searching when you're thinking about what happened from about right here on the way down to about right here, because that's happening in about a third of a second or less. Yep. So, to define that, to actually put that into words where you can do something about it, That's called real soul searching.
Yeah, I slept terrible last night, and I was thinking about what I could do, and I feel like some of the physical stuff is actually just getting my body in better shape to handle going fast and late in the round. And I mean, I was so tired after that round, just physically. I mean, it was 100 degrees outside, and I hadn't played a ton of golf. And I played Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. I played 3 days in a row. First day I played 3 days in a row in a long time, and so. And for me, if I was going to go play again full time, first thing I'm going to or play more, and I'm going to plan on playing more next year, was to get in a little bit better shape, be able to handle going faster, because I think some of my pulls could have been my left knee, left hip bailing out a little bit, because again, my commitment level was okay, but I could be better mentally, and that's my goal going forward. Is I want to be 100% mentally, because I know now that I'm going to hit some crooked tee shots, and I've got to be okay with that. And I've just got to know, look, if you commit to it and it's crooked, okay, fine. Like, go. I've learned how to scramble. I've hit enough little punch shots through trees and through gaps in trees and stuff. So if I can commit to every shot, I can sleep at night. If I don't commit to it, that's when I can smack myself in the head.
So I think this needs to be brought up too. Every time you talk about me like I never missed a shot. I missed a lot of shots in my life. A lot. So
hey, I hit at 400 and you never missed a shot, right? Like that's
So I watched Hogan in his 60s. He still swung at it great, but he still missed some shots. I'm sure that if we could get people to talk about Hogan when he was even playing his best, he hit some average golf shots.
Yeah.
I mean, I watched Nicklaus hit average golf shots that a lot of y'all out there listening to us or watching us right now could have hit. Maybe not under the same circumstances that he hit them, but you were capable of hitting the shot that he hit. Or even a different way of saying that, he hit a shot that you were capable of hitting.
Right.
So no one is perfect. So we have to go out there with the mindset, my goal is this, recognizing that they're not all going to be perfect. And I'm going to try to, I say this often, put one good shot on top of another good shot on top of another good shot, knowing that the string is going to end, and then I have to restart it again. So you can't quit. You talked about mentally checking out, or however you phrased it, not choking, just mentally quitting. Yeah. That bad shot triggers quit. It triggers I can't think, instead of what do I need to do now?
Yeah.
And
would you agree that there is a mental roller coaster and there's a physical roller coaster, and our in the end, our goal with golf is to make them both the most boring that we can make them? If our physical and mental roller coasters aren't much roller coaster at all, then you have a Jack Nicklaus or a Tiger Woods.
You've seen me do this a bunch of times. I'll hold up a golf club right here, and I'll say, if this is perfect, if straight line is perfect, our hope is to just porpoise instead of we do this.
Yeah, big up and downs. Yeah.
Big up and downs, because sometimes we won't change until things are drastic.
Yeah.
And then sometimes we don't change our thinking, and we're way up here until we start this trend.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, what's happened? But if we could recognize what we're doing in this, porpoise state when it first starts to happen, and the only way you do that is you stay in the game. You can't venture in and out of the game. I mean, this is, we talk about this all the time on here. I think I played all the sports. I think you played the majority of them too. I think this is the hardest sport I ever tried to play. And frankly, that's why I loved it, because I knew if I could conquer this, not everybody else could. And, I got a picture of Tiger Woods right there, that he and I together, and then I got one right underneath him as Michael Jordan. And so a lot of people, I made the statement the other day that Tiger was a mental athlete. And the guy said, what do you mean by that? I said, well, ball never went anywhere till he moved it, so he had to mentally move it. I said, Michael Jordan was a reactor. He reacted to what the ball was doing and what the play was doing. He didn't have time to think about it.
Yep.
He reacted. If we can react in our golf swing to what we mentally thought, we're a better player, instead of reacting to a fleeting thought.
Sure, like your tee shot on 18 was you were reacting to a target.
Yes.
I've heard guys say it. So So take us home with, the guys listening at home that are going to go play this week or next week. Talk through just what their goal is, process, golf course. What are you going to leave them with? What do they need to take home?
Well, that's a broad question. I guess I could take that about anywhere I want to.
Mentally. Have a plan, all that stuff.
Well, I think your plan is based on what you've been working on, whatever that is. And hopefully you've been working on something and you go there with some sort of plan. And then to execute the plan, to not panic because of something not quite working out. I talk a lot about staying in the process rather than allowing the result of something to pull you into something else. So many times we're working on something and the result causes us to end up somewhere else completely.
One bad shot, yeah.
Yeah, one bad shot causes us to end up working on something completely different than what you went there to work on. I can tell you never gave the first thing a chance if that happens. Because most of the time, tournament, the ball, result causes different things to happen. And you gotta flow in this. You gotta let it happen for a little while. And don't abandon so quickly.
So last question for you. In the course, I've asked you this before, but in the course of a tournament round or a round of golf that matters, how many shots would you hit in a row a little offline before you'd make an adjustment?
That's a good question. Depended on, which direction I was missing it and how bad I was missing it.
Okay, so your tendency later on in your career were little pulls. Mm-hmm. So you pulled... Let's say you pulled the first iron shot you hit on 1. You pulled number 2's a par 3. You pulled it a little bit. You pulled the third iron shot on 3.
So if they were small misses, let's say let's say this, and this happened often. I'm aimed at the right center of the green. The pin's on the left side of the green, and I pulled it over there 2 feet from the hole.
Good shot.
Crowd's doing this. Down deep in my heart, I know I pulled it 25 feet.
No, you pulled it. Yeah.
So, that has to – see, that's also false. Yep. We can be lured into that was really good. Now, I don't throw my club down and tell the crowd that was pulled 25 feet.
Right.
But I have to recognize in my own mind, hey, look, is that going to be my mojo that day? I'm going to have to aim 25 feet right and pull it all day, or what am we going to do?
Right.
My changes – I never tried to adjust this unless I had to.
Just your release or anything?
Just my release unless I had to.
So would you aim it?
I would aim it differently.
So if you're just pulling a little bit or just pushing a little bit, you might aim it first, and then and the one thing I tell people is just make really, really small adjustments. Whether you're going to aim the club face a little bit more or just something really small to kind of get you. You're going to see, salt it a little bit. Don't over salt it to where it's inedible.
So we were sitting there one day with my parents when I was young, and we had somebody join us for dinner that night, and they asked me about, change and swing changes and things like that. And I said, this is kind of like cooking, You can over-salt something, and then it's ruined. But the right amount of salt or pepper makes it perfect.
Yep.
So you don't just boldly walk in there and dump it all in there. To your point,
that's right.
You gently until you get it.
And this is all assuming that pre-shot routine was solid, commitment was solid. You were locked into what you're trying to do, completely locked in mentally, and the physical just caused a couple little mishits.
Again, this is the hardest game I ever played. I want to make another point too. I've seen a lot of people that swing at a golf ball great, and then I've seen a lot of players that are really, really good. Sometimes they're the same person. Sometimes they are the same person, but not always are they the same person.
Yeah.
Y'all think about that.
Pretty good way to end it.
Yeah.
As always, we enjoy doing these, guys. Thanks for listening in. We'll see you next time.
Be the right club today. Yes!